Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tesla Life number 153 on the 17th of June already, 2020. Here we are. Man,
halfway through this year.
Summer is almost over, guys, and we haven't even had much of it. Yeah, the time is a-flying for sure, for sure. Joining me, as per usual, Mr. Casey Green from the DC area. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing pretty well. Tesla worked me pretty hard last week.
That's right. You've got a bunch of updates to keep us refreshed on, don't you?
I sure do. So 2020.20.5 and 2020.20.12, and then I made a video on all of the autopilot changes that I noticed in the 2020 series, the 2020.20 series, because there was some hidden stuff in there that was nowhere near the release notes, and then none of the other people who get the firmware updates and rush to make a video and say, hey, here it is, there's nothing changed, and they close their video. Stuff changed.
Yeah, get the inside scoop from Casey.
That's right. You'll be able to figure that out right on his YouTube site. Don't leave right now. You can leave after the show. But also with us, as per usual, Mr. Patrick Connor joins us from Oregon. How are you today, sir?
I'm good. Hello, Tesla Nation. We are here to help bring in a future free from fossil fuels.
He has got that down pat, Casey, I have to say. It took him a while, but man, he's got that dialed in at this point. That's great. Well, yeah, we've got a ton of news as per usual. Let's start with Patrick today with his story.
Yeah, this is something I wrote on my blog, and I wanted to look at so Tesla has been selling the Model 3 for 11 quarters now. And we know that this quarter, because of the lovely virus, is going to be anomalous, let's just say. And so I wanted to compare those first 11 to the first 11 quarters of the Toyota Prius and how they compared.
Is this the 97 or the 2004?
The 97. So starting in Japan with their original car. So, so I purposely picked that one because that was a new technology rolled out from them, and they had decisions to make about whether they deployed it globally initially or kept it local. The same sorts of choices that Tesla had to make with the Model 3, and they scaled their delivery first locally in California, then the U.S. And so over that, and now China and Europe, and so the same sorts of Tesla had the same decisions to make that Toyota made, and Toyota took a slower, more conservative path. And one of the criticisms was, oh, you should have started in 2001 when they first brought the non-hatchback version, the sedan Prius to the U.S. And yeah, you could make a case that would be when they I could have compared it, or I could have, like you just mentioned, 2004. You could have compared it to any of those. But if they're making the car and delivering it, then that's where I started.
Yeah, what's really cool with that though is they have the same battery partner.
Right. Yes, Panasonic. Yes, was the battery partner for both. Yeah, and when the reason I wanted to compare them is when the Prius first came to the U.S., we got one. We had ordered it 9 months before it was available in the U.S. We were on the waiting list, so we got one of the first ones that came into the country. And the dealership where we got it, they said that as far as they knew, it was the first one in the state. And I was excited for that tech. And when you come to a red light and the engine shut off and it was just quiet, that was awesome. And then you step on the accelerator and the engine didn't even start right away. You had this, it's moving and the engine's not on. What we now call the EV grin. We got a little taste of that with.
It was the EV smirk in your case.
Yeah, so I was really excited for that back then, and but hybrid technology never really got more than 2% of the market. The people that love it absolutely love it, and there are some people who are diehard fans of that technology, and that's great. But why did it never break out? Why did it not become mainstream? It didn't cross the chasm. Getting to that 20% market share is really difficult, and a lot of products never make it. They have a niche, and that's enough to keep them around, or they try to go across the chasm, have their market failure, and then they die. So that's a really important milestone. Whether or not you can get to mass adoption is if you can get to that 20% mark. And so I wanted to try to figure out, will EVs suffer the same fate as hybrids? So I wanted to compare some of the history of these two. And I particularly picked the Prius because if you think of hybrids, that is the flagship vehicle. And if you think of EVs, it's the Tesla Model 3. It's by far the best-selling EV. So the flagship hybrid versus the flagship EV, how do they compare? And Mark, are you sharing that graphic right now?
I am. Are you not seeing it?
Yeah. Oh, that's fine. Yeah, as long as the viewers are seeing
it. Yes,
cool. Yeah, and you can see that the Model 3's done significantly better over this period than the Prius has. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to, help EVs take over the world, but it certainly is I think the Magic 8 Ball says all signs point to yes. Yeah, it's a good indicator. That's all I can. And then I was just happy to see that it wasn't a negative indicator.
Yeah. So you're showing it almost over 12 quarters. Your graph is. It looks like it's maybe 11 3/4 quarters, and it looks like the red line of the Tesla is, man, that's got to be what, 10 times the ramp at the end of it. It is quite a difference in elevation and takeoff during those 11 plus quarters.
Especially once you hit the fourth quarter.
Yeah. So that's an interesting graph. It's some of that hockey stick that we had seen earlier when the Model 3 was released, but you've got it spread out over a longer period of time. That's very interesting.
I wonder if this is part of why Panasonic was such a bottleneck in the initial rollout of the Model 3, because if they were looking at these same numbers the last time they did this, that I can see why this is a significantly higher ramp than last time we did this. So why would you think that we need to have this many batteries? And then Tesla just kept hammering on them, and they got what they wanted.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. They definitely have had a rocky relationship at times.
Their nature as their corporate culture is very, very conservative.
Right. Yes,
and they're working with a non-conservative company at this point, aren't they?
Yes. Right. Yes. Very different corporate cultures between those two. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the what else was that? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So that's interesting. And Patrick, you put a full article up on Cars with Cords. Is that correct?
Yep. Carswithcords.net. Yep.
Very good. So if you want to read the entire article, it's there.
No. That's yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought you were asking me if I wanted to. I read it, Mark.
You don't want to read it. Okay, that's the way it is. That's fine.
I remember now. So the part of the rollout issue with the hybrids was, when they first started to come out, gas price was kind of affordable, but it was on the rise. And then you had the new technology, but it was new technology combined with the old technology. So you had two powertrains to maintain. And then when you got to the 2004-ish, then the gas price peaked. And then it went back down off a cliff. And then in the middle of the third generation, we had the economy fell apart. So it just took a real long time to get the synergy drive out there. Had a lot of issues to overcome, and I think with the simplicity of the electric and the fact that it's always cheaper, we might see that come out to be another way.
Right.
Especially after looking at your graph here.
Yeah, sales of a Prius, of hybrids in general, really were dependent on how gas prices were doing, and our society has a short memory. So yeah, they spike in 2004. They spiked again in 2008. Right now they're cheap, so people would be buying Hummers and Suburbans and thinking, "Oh, this will be fine." And 4 years from now, gas will be $5 a gallon, and then they'll be selling them at a big loss. I don't get it. Yeah, so going to electric, you don't have to worry about any of that. Electricity prices are very stable. Most places they're covered by utility boards, citizen boards that have to monitor the utilities. And if you really don't like the price, you can always just go put solar panels on your roof, assuming that's an option for you. And then you make your own. You don't have to deal with the utility at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yep,
that's right.
Makes sense. We'll have to see if the next number of quarters continues that. It would be nice to see that chart in another couple of years and see how it compares at that point. So we will revisit, I am sure. Our next story comes from actually a couple of different sources. Rich Rebuilds, of course, popular YouTube channel. Rich rebuilding cars, usually ones that have been underwater, has announced with his other business, which is called the Electric Garage, which is based in Massachusetts, where Rich resides. They made a video about a upgrade that can be performed outside of Tesla to the Model 3 all-wheel drive car, long range. They explain that they have a couple of different abilities to push horsepower into the existing motors, depending on the motor number. If you can get the biggest bang or the smaller one, everyone can get the smaller one apparently, but a certain motor number has to be in your Model 3 in order to get the maximum. I believe it's 150 horsepower boost for the second one. So there's a 50 and then 150. And it's, of course, is somewhat controversial because this is being done outside of Tesla. This is, as Patrick had mentioned before the show, this is almost, as you would call a jailbreak type scenario, where they're circumventing something in the car with a, I know with the 50 horsepower one, the smaller one, it's basically just a harness that you plug in to some plugs that were in the center console, and it avoids something. There's a little chip in it, obviously, that reads or sends a reading, and it allows the system to believe you have something that you don't necessarily have. So Tesla does offer this as an over-the-air update on the Model 3 all-wheel drive. It's a $2,000 option, and that'll give you basically 50 horsepower. And of course, Rich's group, in conjunction with a Quebec, Canada firm, who apparently had come up with the hack, is charging basically half rate that what Tesla's charging. So this is going to be real interesting to see what happens, because of course we know that Tesla has a real capture on all the cars that are sold. They know who you are, they know where the car drives, they know the serial numbers, they know your credit card, they know all this information about you, and a car is constantly updating them. So with someone monkeying with the actual internals of the car, there's going to be a question that's going to come up real quick as to, okay, who owns the car? Who can make changes to the car? What can you change in the car and you can't change in the car? There's a lot of gray area that's going to be exposed with this particular, as they call a ghost performance upgrade. Yeah, what do you guys think?
Well, I think this year we're going to start to see a lot more Tesla mods hitting the street. The initial 2012 Model S's hit the ground in 2012. They came with an 8-year unlimited mile warranty on the powertrain, and that ends this year for some of the earliest cars. The Model 3 did not come with a unlimited powertrain warranty. It just came with, depending on where you took delivery, 100,000, 150,000, 125,000 mile warranty, also depending on which trim you got. So a lot less people will be afraid of voiding their warranty once it's already expired on its own. And Rich's company, is the Electrified Garage, is probably plenty fine because they are in Massachusetts, where they actually have right to repair. I don't know about which province and how they work it, where this kit actually comes from, but I imagine they probably have something similar. But for some of the cars that were modified in the past, what the people have done is they've actually taken them off the Tesla server and moved them to their own VPN, which the cars don't use VPNs anymore, which is probably to circumvent this. So I'm wondering.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So do you think they may be even blocking the signal that goes to Tesla and pushing it to go somewhere else that Tesla has no control over?
Correct. You can't.
Wow.
Yeah, and then the places that do this, they make sure that the upgrades aren't going to lose your root access to your MCU. So your updates come slower, but you do get them. But with this, since they don't use the VPN anymore, I'm curious if you're just going to give up software updates and like, hopefully it has everything you want, because that car is going to be locked in time just like a traditional car at that point.
Yeah, I thought there were a couple different products they had. One where it was just a dongle that you plug in and you still got software updates. And
For now, the Model 3 one doesn't modify the software running on the car side, on the MCU side, but it might modify the variables in flight. I don't know exactly how these particular ones work, but they are all still receiving updates. But since they are receiving updates, unless they lie to the car just right, they can make it detectable.
Right.
That's the next update.
Yeah, that's one thing you'd have to be worried about. If you go down this road, there's, first of all, you might be voiding your warranty. And like you said, there are cars coming out of warranty, and so that's not an issue. But if your car is in warranty, I would assume Tesla, whether they can or can't, assume that they'll be able to detect that you did this. Make sure if you ever take it in for service, you pull that dongle out. Otherwise, you're really just sticking it in their face. And
giving them the tools to detect it easier.
Yeah. And now if you end up pushing this extra horsepower through a motor that wasn't rated for it, I know they're saying they're checking the number, but still it's not one that Tesla did that.
Correct. And with that, part of the reason why they are checking the numbers is for a while, the Performance Model 3 and the non-Performance Model 3 had the same inverter. And now on the newer cars, they do not.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. So be careful. Yeah. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a gray area that's going to be visited, and we've seen this before on What Drives Us, when we talked about, for example, Massey Ferguson, the farm implement manufacturer, locking down their vehicles so service cannot be performed by the farmers that own the equipment. They have to have a certified Massey tech come out with a special dongle, plug it into the vehicle, do the diagnostics run, and then print out a list of parts for the repair. So this is kind of like that as well. And I understand with Massachusetts being a right to repair state, Tesla's not going to have a leg to stand on in Mass. But everywhere else, every other state, I think it's open game. And I wonder if Tesla will be pushing this issue, or will they just do something similar to what happened with the vehicles that were salvaged and turn around and say, well, yeah, you can do whatever you want, but of course supercharging and fast charging is turned off.
Right, so software updates are turned off, or supercharging support, or anything else. Yeah, anything that Tesla still controls, they could use against you, so be careful.
Yep, your supercharging turns off, your radio turns off.
Can't use your radio; it's dangerous. We don't.
Oh no, we're not gonna let you autopilot because we don't know what you did to it, and you're gonna get us in the news.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that probably will come from this, and we'll certainly keep our eyes on this as time goes along. But
hopefully they do the right thing.
It is a bit of the Wild West that we're experiencing here. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Our next story is about, of course, the Tesla Semi announcement, which had happened last week with an email that came from Elon that was quickly leaked everywhere. And what's interesting is that previous Elon had made a announcement, or I guess an update during the previous financial quarter, where he had indicated that the Tesla Semi was basically going to be delayed. They were going to concentrate on other things. And that, of course, was thought to be about the constraint in batteries. How many batteries they actually have, what type of what type of cars the batteries were going into, how many were required, how many could be manufactured. And with Tesla's recent announcement here about opening up the Semi to be produced at volume, we don't know what volume is, but there is speculation that could this be part of the battery day and other announcements that are kind of being stacked up now since battery day has been delayed? Could it be that Tesla has really overcome constraint on batteries and that they are at the cusp or about to put into motion that batteries are going to roll out a lot faster and a lot more numerous than what we have expected or seen in the past? Part of the deal maybe with Panasonic's agreement just recently, another 3-year deal for Tesla Giga 1, that they are going to continue to push out batteries at an agreed upon pace that was in the contract with Tesla. So could this all be pointing back that Tesla has some sort of breakthrough that's allowing them to produce batteries faster or cheaper or in more volume than they've ever been able to do before?
I suspect that Elon was the leaker. When you combine it with some fresh competition entering the scene, I think it might have been Elon.
So it was just more of cannon fire just to let people know?
I don't think that. I mean, I'm sure they were probably already working on it, but I think the announcement that they were working on it, rather than just say, surprise, here's your first 10,000 trucks ready to roll out to the deliveries, is to kind of let a little air out of the competitor's tire, especially after they got sued for copying the design.
Yeah.
Yeah. This makes the assumption that means that they're out of battery constraint, and that this means that price parity is just around the corner. And, well, I hope those are true. I don't think that you can base it on, hey, we're going to start making the Semi now to say that they're not constrained. Certainly the Semis are going to use a significant amount of batteries. Mm-hmm. They're now making their mega packs that are even bigger for, we'll talk about some of that later. So there's still a big demand for batteries. And I'm glad they're doing this, but then in that leaked email about the Semi going into production, they talked about the drivetrain and some parts being made in Giga, Nevada, but where's the rest of it? They just said some other states.
Other states.
Yeah, so there's still, when you're still trying to figure out what factory it's going to be, or if you have to build a factory, I don't think we can expect to see them tomorrow.
Build them in Buffalo, put them on a train.
Yeah, it's certainly that if they can't even name where they're going to be built, and then of course, do they have to build an actual factory to do it? Are they do they have to build a line or number of lines? Obviously, the Semi is not going to be as many units as other Tesla vehicles, but and probably more of a built by hand type scenario. But it's interesting that they've never named anywhere at this point. It's just other states, and what does that mean?
Yeah, so they could definitely do Buffalo. When you think about the size of a mega pack, is as big as at least 3 tractors, right? Or 2 tractors.
Does it make sense to ship the other unit all the way from Nevada to Buffalo?
Not necessarily, but it would be the perfect FU to California.
Yeah, it would. It would.
I can see them doing that out of spite.
And of course, there's that other place in California that has never really been indicated as to what it is. A very large plant or not warehouse, but yeah, it could be there too. But I would hesitate to say that they'd ship them that far across the country to another location. I think that would be.
Since the new US Giga is not done yet, I mean, they don't have too much choice unless they're going to pop up a tent at the Giga original.
Curiously enough, that warehouse in California is roughly halfway between Nevada and the Bay Area.
Yeah.
So, not saying that's it, but that's interesting.
Yeah. It's not really another state, but it's definitely a possibility. The other thing I wanted to point out was that It doesn't necessarily mean that they've gone to price parity or cheaper or anything like that, but it does indicate probably that they can now build them at cost. I can see them doing something at cost just to get them out there, get the because when Tesla comes out with the first couple of units, they are not up to par sometimes, and this gives them time to shake it down, and obviously they'll probably they already said they're going to do a lot of the internal consumption, but if they don't, they'll probably do the first deliveries closer to the design center, the engineering center, and really nail it down, and then they can slowly speed up like they did with Model 3, but without promising a particular ramp speed.
Right. So they should build the first one in Giga, Nevada, so it can then take the drivetrains to Giga, Texas, or wherever else they're going to build it.
Put them all to work immediately off the production line. Yes.
Right.
Well, they could do the prototypes that way, and once they decide, all right, these are production, and they could just make the necessary changes to the prototypes. And we've only ever seen 2 of them running around, anyway.
Right.
Put them to use.
Yeah, absolutely, and we expect Tesla will use the first number of them to run internally, because when you're selling to multi-billion-dollar companies, they're going to be pretty upset if the thing doesn't come out of the box pretty perfect. There's going to be, there would be a price to pay if they were letting someone else do their testing for them.
Especially if this is production equipment, which this class of vehicle, it's all you use it for is to make money. If you're down constantly, Tesla better be paying you. And they
trucks make no money unless they're rolling.
Right, and Tesla put money on it that you'll be 1,000,000 miles before you have to do anything, or we pay. So they're going to dial it in.
Our next story is just a short little one. There was a Twitter, I guess, suggestion that came into Elon about the CyberTruck recently, and it was to allow the truck to have a fold-down rear compartment. So where the rear glass is and the half wall, this person had the idea of being able to fold the wall in on itself with the piece of glass to allow there to be more storage space. So being able to push the storage space a little bit wider and get a little more space with the fold. It's kind of like the Avalanche vehicle that had the ability to do that type of thing. So Elon grabbed the suggestion and said the idea was interesting and he would be looking into it. So again, it's amazing that the CEO of this company is either he or somebody else or many people are monitoring the Twitter feed all the time, looking for little ideas or little suggestions that come in. Elon's been many times, he's asked his 10 million followers, hey, what about this? Or what do you think an idea for that would be? And it's refreshing to see someone take those ideas and run with them, as we've seen already.
Well, I mean, the whole truck was designed this way, so I'm glad to see that he hasn't closed. I'm glad to see he hasn't closed the door. Before the show, Mark and I were joking that we called it the Tesla Ranch because with the midgate. I really hope they do, because that would solve the truck camping problem. Because the prototype, that would make it difficult to get the air back there and to get out should the vault be locked. And
yeah. Well, speaking of air, that leads right into our next story. Cold thrusters for the rocket thrust for the Roadster 2. A YouTube channel called Engineering Explained went into great detail using math, which we've said we're never going to use on this show, but they have gone into great detail to describe and figure out what the rocket thrust or cold thrusters would be able to, how they would perform, what type of acceleration you could expect. Could a car actually be lifted off the ground with strategic placing of cold thrusters around the car? What type of a container, how big would the container be that would have to store the pressurized air or gas to power these different cold thrusters? And some surprising information. And granted, it's a lot. You can watch it. It's about 18 minutes or so. And there's a whiteboard involved that's quite full of math equations. that is gone through in great detail, but there's a lot to be gleaned from the information. And one of the pieces of information is that it's not completely out of the realm of reality that this car could have a 0 to 60 in basically 1 second, which was, that's eye-opening, especially when Elon had indicated that initially it was going to be a 1.9 second for the base model. And now this particular math formula shows that could be about 1.1 to 1 seconds for a 60 mile an hour from 0, which is, man, if a Model S throws your eyeballs back in your sockets, I can't imagine what the Roadster would do with a speed of 1 second to 60.
Yeah, that's incredible. I hope they put one in the front too, so you can also do 60 to 0 when you need to.
he implied that they'd be all around, kind of like the ultrasonic sensors, and then when he started talking about the under the license plate, I'm hoping he didn't just turn it into just thrust only, because it's supposed to have the cornering and stopping, and I don't know how the hover is supposed to work.
Yeah, and of course they did touch upon that this probably is only going to be something you could use off-road, like a track scenario, private property, things of that nature, because a thrust coming out the back near the license plate or under the license plate is going to affect the car behind you, without a doubt, or anyone walking in the general vicinity of the car when it's actually deployed. So again, a lot of this is speculation, but a lot of us thought when Elon initially mentioned that there could be a SpaceX package, a lot of us were going, yeah, right. Yeah, he's going to put a thruster in the car. Right. Okay.
Elon, good joke.
Yeah, and then when he said it would actually hover, again, oh, that's ridiculous. So it was really cool to see someone go through the math, someone who's an engineer, and say, yeah, actually, it's possible that this could hover for up to a second, 1.1 seconds. It could be off the ground, floating in the air. And then, of course, you're going to deplete the tank, and it's going to take a while to pump it back up. So it's not like you could just float around all the time. But it'd be a neat little party trick. That would be pretty cool. Yeah. You need to adjust your car in the parking spot. Push it over. Don't try that at home, kids.
No, I wouldn't. I would not want to be beside the car and try to push it as it's floating in the air for that 1 second.
So when you buy the SpaceX package, is there going to be a tutorial in the video owner's manual on how to do a FOD walk in the track?
Gosh, I hope so. I hope there's a lot of tutorials for people's sake.
So before you push this button, make sure you can walk the track. Make sure there's no sticks or debris or.
Yeah. Because if there's somebody behind you, it could throw some projectile at them, or a car behind you, it could break a windshield or whatever. You definitely want to make sure that the backblast area is clear before you engage such a thruster.
Yeah, this is going to require a different type of owner, definitely. Someone that is going to be looking at these things. I hesitate to think about, some of the stories we hear about people not taking care now. With this could be deadly as to what actually happens with cold thrusters being engaged.
You add the SpaceX package, it adds the full self-drive package and doesn't let you delete it.
Doesn't let. There's a solution.
This car will drive itself. It'll say, "I'm at the track now. I'll decide if I can do this."
You hit the button, and then you got a computer assist, whether you want it or not.
Makes sense.
When I was looking at this, I was actually thinking that the thrusters would be used more for downforce than actual lift, because that's how you get traction. And so I think that's probably more important than the actual thrust, is that you get traction. And especially if you're cornering, to be able to hold the corner at high speed. So it'll be interesting to see how this is really used. And I'm sure after it comes out, they'll be like, hey, we've done a bunch of experiments. Here's a software update, and it does even more.
Yes.
So it'll be cool.
I have a feeling that for downforce, they'll be able to provide a lot longer duration. Because he did specify initially that it would have downforce, cornering, braking, and acceleration.
Right. Yeah. And so if they know if the tire's slipping, then you apply it when you need it, and you're not gonna. It's not like lifting the whole car where you have to do them all full blast all the way to get it off the ground. You can use it smartly and, like you said, for a lot longer duration.
Yeah.
Because if the car weighs 4,000 pounds, 12,000 pounds, well, probably not that heavy, and you only need to push one corner down harder, and you've got 12,000 pounds of thrust for 3 seconds, you can put down an additional 800 pounds on that one corner.
Yeah.
For a lot longer.
Yeah, kind of like an assisted electric bike. Just a 100 watts makes a big difference. So here, if you just a couple 100 pounds of downforce in the right spot, can really make a difference for traction.
Yep. Next, we're just going to touch on this. The CyberTruck looks like it might come to market first before the other competitors. One being Ford, whose electric pickup, all electric pickup, has experienced some delays, and they're pushing it out to 2022 apparently. So we've got a year and a bit, year and a half plus before 2022. It could, and again, we don't even have a factory for the CyberTruck. I realize that, but there certainly is talk that Tesla's ramping up CyberTruck up the ladder of what needs to be done first, what's a priority, and with the number of back orders that they've got for the vehicle, Elon looks like he wants to address that. So we thought for sure that Ford would get out a little bit earlier, but due to some internal things, they've decided to delay a bit, about a year. So
yeah. That's sad. I think this is one of the big reasons that a lot of EV fans don't like the traditional automakers, because this is not their profit center. This is not their main product. It is not their priority. And they've shown time and time again that they will do compliance cars or delay schedules, or it's sad. I really wish that this is a kind of game where you're either all in or it's just not going to work, because you don't get the economies of scale, you don't get the volume, which means you don't get the price breaks, and you don't get the margin, and then it's not profitable, so of course you don't want to do it. So I really wish that they would cut bait and just say, we're not doing any more ICE, we're going all electric as of 2022, but that's never going to happen. So I hold my hopes. What's that?
A couple of the boutiques have done it.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, and I think the big players need to do the same, and at whatever date, put a line in the sand and hit it, because they're the buggy whip makers, and that market is going to go away. So instead, they're going to just ride it all the way till their death, because they can't make the transition, and that's just sad.
Yeah, they're not trying to bridge that chasm. They're not trying to get things a little bit closer so they can make that leap. At some point, they could sit back, wait too long, and say that the leap's too big. We'll never make it. It's
right.
Over.
So my hopes are with the startups. Go ahead, Casey.
Yeah, so it's like we don't trust them, and we don't like them, and it looks like they're going to pull another Kodak. I mean, Kodak made the first marketable digital camera, and they rode it till film died. GM made the first production, mass-produced, modern electric car, and look, what are they doing? I mean, they do have had the Volt, and they do have the Bolt EV, but I mean, where is that really taking them right now?
Right.
No, they're sitting back. There's promises. There's some investment that has happened, but
VW-esque promises.
Other than China, there's been no new cars come from them, and we in North America are really wanting them and others to take the bull by the horns and start producing.
Right, but another way that we see this and think, oh yes, it's just more empty talk, is did they stop all of their production? Like, hey, there's no new F-150, there's no new whatever sedan is left. No, they only stopped the EV truck.
Oh no, the cash cows will continue to be produced. Absolutely.
Which is what we're both to your point, it makes them look disingenuous.
Well, let's speak about another thing that is a little bit different with Tesla. Casey's got a story about an upgrade that's recently happened under the radar. Wasn't really even announced.
I like this one. So we saw that the Model 3 or Model Y started shipping with USB-C ports. It has one USB-A port in the entire vehicle.
Oh, I didn't even know it had one.
Yeah, one USB-A. Everything else is USB Type-C. So now, Model 3 has the same treatment. USB-C ports all over.
Awesome.
And that was just a running change. So if they do that to the Model X or the Model S, I will be looking for a retrofit kit.
Yep. So that's great news that they're starting to roll that out, and it makes sense. Once you run out of the parts that you had for the other car, you're now ordering for the Model Y this new type of part, these new abilities. Why not roll it into the other car that it fits in seamlessly?
Right.
Gives you again economies of scale, and it also improves you in the eyes of your clients. It's a win-win.
Yep, and we're talking parts price difference at the chip level, the connector of pennies
Yeah.
to integrate this, and you don't have to worry about the machine or the human putting it in upside down because it only goes in two ways.
One.
It doesn't matter which way. Yeah. If the robot put it in upside down and it's Type C, that's fine.
Not a problem.
There is no upside down.
Our next story is about Giga Berlin, which is still happening. Just going to share a photo here that we've got that came in from a video from the Berlin group that's flying drones over the site daily. The Wolfpack, I believe they're called. And what they're showing here is some foundations being built. Obviously, a couple of large cranes have shown up on site since we've last seen. And outside of this picture that you can't even see, there are a few temporary structures that have been built for construction offices and washrooms and a conference room that is is on site. But they're temporary buildings. They're not part of the Tesla building. But what's interesting here is the concrete and the steel that's being rolled in to make these square pads that you can see about halfway through the photo. So we've got, it looks like to be about 15 or so of these pads that they're pouring concrete, putting in steel reinforcements, and making these concrete cubes. Not really, I have no idea, to be honest with you, as to how this is rolled into the construction.
This looks similar to like an evolution of what they started in Nevada and then moved on to China. Like in Nevada, you'd see them dig these big pits that would hold, trucks. And then in China, it kind of looked more like this.
Yeah, well, certainly the China was a long assembly line, so it was a large rectangle, and this is looking, if those are foundation supports for a building, then we're definitely looking at a large rectangle again. Yeah. But it is interesting to see that the tower cranes are pushed out a little bit far. Yeah. I thought they would be closer to the action, but maybe there's going to be stuff on both sides of the crane, so the crane will end up being in the middle. Again, speculation on my part. But it is interesting to see the site is starting to come to life. More and more employees are appearing on site to perform jobs. And of course, you can see some of the final preparation, it looks like, for roads or parking lots are going in as well in the foreground.
Is this the group with the young man who got the permission slip from Elon because Cybertruck were?
I am not sure. I knew about that story, but I'm not sure if the Wolfpack is part of, or that gentleman is with the Wolfpack. I'm not sure.
Hey, Patrick. Looks like they're spending a lot of money to not do something, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is never going to happen. This is just that was such a crazy day. So yeah,
that was a fun day.
What I want to know is which one of those is going to be the underground rave hall?
Well, there you go. Exactly. Yeah,
that's the important one.
Because we know it was permitted before the construction started, so I'm sure that a special rave hole has already been dug to get.
Oh, it was for real. Foundation. I bet you it's like an underground storage, and like they just have a rave before they fill it with battery acid.
Oh, exactly. Patrick's got our story about what's going on in Michigan.
Oh no, I'm doing China.
Oh,
yes.
Is that you?
I'm doing the states.
Sorry.
So forever, even after they bought Tesla stock and put it in their pension, and Tesla Tool and Die was purchased, Michigan has been fighting tooth and nail, obviously at the hands of the manufacturers and dealerships, that Tesla couldn't service or sell their vehicles. And they didn't win, but they got some loopholes enlarged to allow them to function. They do have to run service as a wholly owned subsidiary, which is stupid because if it's the same company and that's all they do is work for the master company, why bother? But anyway, so now you can pick up your Tesla vehicle without having to cross the state line first. They were still collecting the tax because the way we tax automobiles is stupid. And now when you have service, you can get your mobile service, and you can actually go to a service center once it's constructed and get your vehicle maintained and repaired.
So now not only can you get it serviced, but now you can actually pick up the vehicle in the state that you purchased it in. Yes, which is another victory.
No more 9-hour trips to get your filters changed or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So that's good to see that they're winning some of these small victories and getting a few wins in the win column with these other states that are still outstanding. I still
Texas,
haven't.
South Carolina.
Yeah, I think we should probably get a spreadsheet together and see who's still left. Who the holdouts besides Texas, South Carolina? There's a few more, but it's interesting to see that they are still fighting these battles, and in this case, putting a few in the win column, which is great to hear.
This kind of stuff infuriates me.
Yes.
If you want to compete, do it with a product that people want to buy, not with legislation that says people can't buy it. That's not competition. That's just legal blocking, and it's ridiculous. You're not helping people. You're not helping consumers. You're not making the planet a better place.
Yeah. You remember that cartoon they released a couple years ago about how they were the better choice and most obvious and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, if you're so much better, why don't you let the consumer decide?
Right.
No, that they don't want that. Absolutely not. That doesn't make any sense to them.
Which means that they're lying to us.
Like, of course they're lying to us. They're absolutely lying to us.
Right.
Oh, my goodness. Yep. Well, hopefully they'll keep fighting the good fight, and we'll get a few more in the win column. Our next story is about a Model Y that got into a bit of a serious crash. This happened on the 101 near Santa Barbara in California. And this Model Y was obviously rear-ended, and it was by a Ford F-250 or so pickup dually, a large pickup truck. And it actually hit this car as well as 9 others.
Whoa.
They don't know. There was no explanation as to why the road rage had happened. Some reports indicated that the pickup driver was hitting people intentionally. We don't know that for a fact. That was just in the article. But this is kind of interesting that we're looking at the back area that obviously crumpled along with the hatchback. But when we talk about the Model Y and the third row of seats, if the seats were facing the opposite direction, like some of the S's have an option of doing, that person would not fare so well in this crash, I would hesitate to say. And again, we don't know if the third row is going to face backwards or forwards. Sandy Monroe has hinted he now knows, but he won't tell us unless we buy his $40,000 report. So we're going to wait on that till somebody else tells us. But
have you started a Patreon account?
On Patreon down below.
Steve, one donor for $40,000.
Exactly. Yeah,
you'll be at the Sandy Monroe level of Patreon
that you cannot wait for answered. Absolutely. But this has been the first crash rear end, major crash or rear end in a Model Y, and it was photographed here on the 101. So I did want to share that with people just so they can see. And of course, for the size of the pickup truck, there it is. So it's a large vehicle that was on the highway and had slammed into this Model Y. But
surprised to see it's not lifted, because that damage is quite high on the Model Y, and that's not a small vehicle.
Yeah, well, who knows how it happened. If the truck had bumped another vehicle first and jumped a little bit, maybe the bumper jumped up a little bit. We don't know the details, but
on the Model S's that had the rear-facing seats, they had a extra crash structure in the rear, and I'm suspecting that regardless of whether they are front or rear-facing, that we'll see the same, or not the same, but similar concept of extra crash structures in the rear to redirect energy to the outsides of the vehicle rather than straight into the rear. And hopefully, after looking at this, that they also put some of that in the brace under the window, where the spoiler sits.
Yeah. Well, that's and I'm sure that Tesla examines all of these crashes very closely after the car's been released to the public. There's got to be, there are improvements and things that they learn from crashes, and hopefully this is one of those things that they can look at. Thankfully, no one was injured substantially. We did have one person that went to the hospital, but it wasn't life-threatening. So it was good that everyone, even in the other 9 vehicles that were hit, everyone walked away from this. But it can be a learning point when you see what actually happens on the roads here.
Yeah, I really want to know the story behind this guy's road rage. He really needs to lose his license if this was intentional, and just because he was angry, needs counseling or therapy or something, but not to be on the road.
Absolutely. But when you look at this, look at where the hinge is at the top of the glass, and then look at the seats. Your head would be under that hinge if you were sitting in the rear seat in forward-facing position.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that they would have been comfortable, but I'm saying that it looks like they should have been survivable if you were sitting with your head facing forward, because of how that crumpling is. It's into the hatch for sure, but it's kind of closer to the taillights than it is to that hinge point, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, hopefully Tesla can buy this if it's totaled and goes to salvage, that they can then pick it up and figure out, look at it in detail. All right, is this an unplanned crash test? Maybe not a test, but let's get the results and use them to make improvements.
For sure.
Exactly. Okay, with that, Patrick has got our next story in China. What's going on?
Okay, yeah, so earlier in the show, we talked about how the CyberTruck had a lot of community input. Elon asked on Twitter what features would be cool, and people said something like a air compressor and built-in charging and ramps, and a lot of those things got into the final version. And so now they are doing the same thing, asking for a China-inspired vehicle. So the cool thing about this is Tesla started their master plan, Roadster, expensive sedan, more affordable sedan, and now they're actually looking at what is going to be an even more affordable car, and it's something that they're going to design and build in China and hopefully ship around the world. So they are asking for designs. So if you have some car design skills and you want to, this is open to anybody, you can submit your designs, and they are going to be looked at, and you could influence what their next vehicle is.
That's awesome. Especially all those people that do those fantastic renders that we've seen throughout the years. Man, put the pencil to paper or the digital pen to screen, because this could really make a name for yourself if Tesla likes what you're showing.
Yeah, if you're in design school and you get your car selected, you're writing your ticket to your next job when you can say, yeah, they selected my design.
Franz just had to make a couple tweaks to it, and it was out the door.
Yeah.
I designed the model Generation 4 tiny car.
The Model C.
I think he's done with model for a while, though.
Yeah, they said they're not going to do the model. So, what what would a Chinese-inspired? We could call it a dragon, but it's going to be a tiny dragon, the baby dragon.
The Tesla dragon. Love that. That would be nice. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's about it for this week. Casey, any shout-outs for the end of the show?
Sure do. Go check out my 3 new videos on youtube.com/CaseyGreen. That's KACEYGREEN. So I've got the 2020.20.5, which was out for like 3 days, 4 days, and then it was immediately replaced with 2020.20.12. And then I did another video where I pointed out I went on a trip with Autopilot, and it did some stuff that it's never done before. Take a look.
Cool.
Very good. Very good. Mr. Connor, any shout-outs for us?
Sure. You can find my occasional scribblings at carswithcords.net. Thanks, everybody.
Very good. Very good. Now, if you're still watching this program and you haven't already given us a thumbs up, please do so, and a subscription. We would really appreciate the numbers. Numbers and thumbs up in the video help us get into more eyes. YouTube's algorithms push us out further, and we get introduced to more people. So anything you can do in that category would be great. If you have a dog and he does not have a YouTube account, go ahead, sign him up and subscribe into the service. We would really appreciate it. So thanks very much, everyone, for watching us this week. Stay tuned next week and catch up with us and find out what's happening in the Tesla life.
Man, my dog, he gets like all this nature videos, and then occasionally these 3 dudes come on and talk to him.
Tesla for Fido. Fido for Tesla. Thanks, Lee Moon.
Good night, everyone. Have a great week.